गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गनर शॉट। गनर शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। वणक्कम, जय हिंद और प्रणाम। आज हम इंडियन एशियन इलेक्शंस 2024 के बारे में बात करेंगे, जो हाल ही में खत्म हुए हैं। और इसके बारे में बात करने के लिए हमारा पुराना एम्बेसडर टू इंडोनेशिया, एम्बेसडर गुरजीत सिंह, हमारे साथ हैं। सर, गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गनर शॉट वंस अगेन।
थैंक यू। जय हिंद।
एंड मैं सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, इट्स अ सच अ प्रिविलेज टू हैव यू हियर, समवन who's been in Indonesia and who's seen Indonesia so up close to explain to us about Indonesia। क्योंकि अ, अमूमन हमारा नजर जो है वो पाकिस्तान के ऊपर होता है, या म्यांमार के ऊपर होता है, या चीन के बारे में बात करते हैं, और इंडोनेशिया, आई मीन इंडियन ओशन के बारे में बात करते हैं। पर ये जो हमारा नियर नेबरहुड है, उसके बारे में हम कम जानकारी होता है। और इससे पहले सर, बिफोर यू स्टार्ट, आई जस्ट वांट टू गिव एन इंट्रोडक्शन टू एवरीवन ऑन इंडोनेशिया। अगर आप देखेंगे, ये मैप है पैसिफिक ओशन और इंडियन ओशन का, जहां बीच में है इंडोनेशिया। इंडोनेशिया का जो एरिया है वो लाल आउटलाइन में दिखाया गया है। अगर आप देखेंगे, इंडोनेशिया एक नेबर है, इट्स अ नियर नेबर ऑफ इंडिया। उसके साथ साथ ये इसका लोकेशन इतना स्ट्रेटेजिक और फैला हुआ है कि वो पैसिफिक ओशन और इंडियन ओशन दोनों को कवर करता है। हम अमूमन मलाक्का स्ट्रेट के बारे में बात करते हैं, और मलाक्का स्ट्रेट का साउथ सदर्न पार्ट या साउथ सदर्न हिस्सा, दक्षिणी हिस्सा पूरा इंडोनेशिया है। दूसरी बात, हम हर बार हम साउथ चाइना सी के बारे में बात करते हैं। साउथ चाइना सी का सदर्न पार्ट भी इंडोनेशिया ही है। और पैसिफिक ओशन से लेकर इंडियन ओशन में जाने के लिए सिर्फ मलक्का स्ट्रेट ही नहीं है, दो चार और ओम्बाक वेटर स्ट्रेट्स हैं, वगैरह वगैरह। और ये सब स्ट्रेट जो है वो इंडोनेशिया के थ्रू गुजरते हैं, या इंडोनेशिया के बीचों बीच गुजरते हैं। तो इंडोनेशिया जो है वो एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट देश है। वो सिर्फ इम्पोर्टेंट देश इसीलिए नहीं कि वो इंडियन ओशन और पैसिफिक ओशन के बीच में है, पर अगर हम देखेंगे, ये फोर्थ मोस्ट पॉपुलस कंट्री है। और ये भी माना जाता है इट्स द थर्ड बिगेस्ट डेमोक्रेसी। इसका आबादी जो है मोर देन 270 मिलियन है, और इसके 1700 आइलैंड है, टापू है। बहुत आर नॉट इनहेबिटेड, बट बड़े बड़े आइलैंड जैसे सुमात्रा हुआ, कालिमंटान हुआ, जावा हुआ, पपुआ हुआ, ये सब पॉपुलेटेड है और इंडोनेशिया के हिस्सा है, और ये फैला हुआ देश है। इसका इकोनॉमी जो है तकरीबन $1 ट्रिलियन है, और ग्रोथ, जीडीपी ग्रोथ तकरीबन 4-5%, 4% के ऊपर है। और वर्ल्ड बैंक के मुताबिक इट्स एन एमर्जिंग मिडिल इनकम कंट्री, और हमारे साथ है। और ये भी बताया जाता है कि जहां तक इंडोनेशिया का सवाल है, वो उसका सबसे बड़ा ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर चाइना है, और उसका सबसे बड़ा सिक्योरिटी पार्टनर जो है वो यूएसए है। और मेरे को अभी भी याद है, जब मैं 15 साल 16 साल पहले जब यूएसए गया था, तो इंडोनेशिया से एक एयरफोर्स ऑफिसर आए हुए थे, जहां जिसके साथ हमने कोर्स किया था। और हमारे साथ इंडोनेशिया का एक ऑफिसर ने नेशनल डिफेंस कॉलेज में भी कोर्स किया है। और इस अगर ये देखेंगे तो इंडोनेशिया का डिफेंस कोऑपरेशन इंडिया के साथ भी है और यूएसए के साथ भी है, और पर चाइना के साथ उतना नहीं है जितना हम सब सोचते हैं, राइट। और हाल ही में वहाँ, जैसे मैंने बताया, प्रेसिडेंशियल इलेक्शंस हुए हैं, वो डेमोक्रेटिक इलेक्शंस हैं पूरे। पर इसके खुद कुछ पहलू हैं, और उसको जानकारी हासिल करना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, क्योंकि जो भी प्रेसिडेंट इस इलेक्शन में आएगा उसके साथ हमें डील करना पड़ेगा। क्या ये सरकार अलग तरीके से बिहेव करेगा, या जिस तरीके से आज तक बिहेव करता आया वही करेगा? ये सब चीजों के बारे में बताने के लिए, राइट, हमारे साथ हैं एम्बेसडर गुरजीत सिंह, जो वहाँ हमारे एम्बेसडर रह चुके हैं। जैसे मैंने आपको पहले बताया, हमारा एम्बेसडर रह ही चुके नहीं। मैं आपको फोटो दिखाना चाहता हूँ। वो पहले फोटो है, ये हमारा गुरजीत सिंह साहब और डॉक्टर मिसेस मेघावती सुपर्णो पुत्री, जो इनके प्रेसिडेंट रहे 2004 के लगभग। और उसके बाद इनका देखिए फोटोग्राफ है प्रभावो, जनरल प्रभावो के साथ, जो आज के दिन वो इनका प्रेसिडेंट बनने वाले हैं। इनका इतना जानकारी होने के बाद, अगर हम इन गना शॉट में इनका ये स्ट्रेटेजिक नॉलेज ही नहीं है, जनरल नॉलेज और नॉलेज अबाउट इंडोनेशिया हम अपने चैनल में इस्तेमाल नहीं करेंगे, तो हम बेवकूफ हैं। पर हम बेवकूफ नहीं है, इसीलिए मैंने हमारे एम्बेसडर साहब को बुलाया है। और सर, ऑन योर्स, आप हमें थोड़ा ज्ञान दीजिए अबाउट इंडोनेशिया, उसके इलेक्शंस और इंडिया और इंडोनेशिया रिलेशंस। ऑल ओवर टू यू।
Thank you, General Shankar. Most gracious of you to invite me again. And I'm very happy to be on Gunner's Shot. This time, talking about a country that I dearly love, Indonesia. So, today I'm going to try and explain the Indonesian elections and what happens now and why they are important. You have mentioned that Indonesia is a very large democratic country like India. So, India and Indonesia have been having elections in the same year since 2004. And this year, the United States is also having the election this year. So, three of the world's most populous democracies are having election this year, Indonesia being the first. Now, how does the Indonesian election work? We all know that General Prabowo is called the winner of the presidential election. I say called because the formal election results will only come by 20th March, though the election took place on 14th of February. Now, this is a bit alien to us, no? Because when we start counting, we get the results the same day, but then we start our elections and don't do the counting for a while. And when we do the counting, we announce results. So I think the time period between election and results in Indonesia is similar to that of India, from the date of election to date of result, except that our counting is faster. Secondly, we use electronic voting machines. They don't. They use a paper ballot. Now I want to explain. So therefore, General Prabowo is declared the winner by exit polls come early results, what together are called quick results. So there are various think tanks and polling companies who carry out an exit poll on the day of the voting, and then they get the early results out of various booths and they add it up and project it. In my experience, from 2004 onwards, the deviation between the quick result and the actual result is minuscule. That is how correct they get it. So, on the basis of the quick results, Prabowo is anticipated to be the winner. And world leaders, including Prime Minister Modi, have sent him congratulatory messages. Now, what was this election about? Let's take the process. A normal voter in Indonesia would have got 5 ballots when he went to vote. Because in India, we are talking of voting for everything on the same day, all elections on one day. In Indonesia, they have it. So the voter would get a ballot to vote for the president and vice president. The second ballot to vote for like the Lok Sabha, they have the DPR, House of People's Representatives. Then they have a version of the Rajya Sabha called the DPD, which is non-party but every state has 4 senators. That is also elected. So that's the third ballot paper. The fourth ballot paper is for the local provincial assembly. And in some cases, in small towns and all, there is the fifth ballot paper for the town council or the village council. Now, missing in this is the governor. Normally, there should be also an election for the governor. But the governor's election cycle of 5 years has got changed in many states. As a result, not all happen at this time. In some cases, governors are nominated and elections have not taken place. But as widely as possible, people are voting on one day for all these elections. Now, therefore, this election is very complex. One day, so many elections, 800,000 booths, an electorate of 204 million out of a total population of 270 million. Now, if you understand this complexity, then you will know that it's not an easy election to run. As of today, 84 election officials have died in this election process from stress-related illnesses. It's a very stressful process. Now, we know in India that we have national parties. They also have 24 parties, national parties. But out of those 24, I think 17 or 18 only were approved to run in the main election. Now, no party can nominate a presidential candidate unless it has 20% strength in the parliament. This is therefore you can nominate a candidate, but you must have 20% of the parliamentary seats behind you. As a result, parties make coalitions to nominate presidential candidates. And normally it includes giving the vice presidential slot to an ally. So Prabowo represents the Gerindra party, the Great Indonesia party, which has about 15% of the seats in parliament last time, and as per current indications is running at about 13% this time. He has 4 parties in his coalition. But the most important was that he has the support of the president, Jokowi, who is not from any of these 4 parties. He comes from the PDIP, the ruling party, but he did not support their candidate. So Jokowi's charisma and support went behind Prabowo. The second candidate was Anis Baswedan, who was the education minister in Jokowi's first term. Then he became governor of Jakarta on Prabowo's party. Ultimately deserted both and grasped the Islamic parties and came out as an independent presidential candidate. Now, Jokowi's son is Prabowo's vice presidential candidate, though he is a member of the PDIP. But he is not nominated by the PDIP, he is nominated by Jokowi. Anis Baswedan took Maumin Iskandar, the leader of an Islamic party, as his running mate. Now, on paper, the strongest candidate was of the PDIP, the ruling party, and he is Ganjar Pranowo, for 10 years the governor of Central Java. And his running mate is Mahfoud, who is the current coordinating minister for political security matters in Jokowi's cabinet. So Prabowo is Jokowi's defense minister. Baswedan is the former Jokowi education minister. And the vice president of Ganjar Pranovo candidate is currently Jokowi's coordinating minister. Now, the PDIP is like the mother party in Indonesia. It is the party of founding father Sukarno. And after Sukarno, there was a coup. So from 1965 to 1998, General Suharto ruled. And initially he ran a military government. But afterwards he had elections and his party is called Golkar. Now Golkar is the second largest party in parliament even now and is part of Prabowo's coalition.
Coalitions.
Yes. But they are part of Jokowi's government. Now, in 1998, when Suharto was ousted, then democracy returned to Indonesia and elections started happening. Megawati Sukarno Putri, Sukarno's daughter, had the charisma and the name and won the election, but they would not let a woman become the president. Please remember, Indonesia is a Muslim country, world's biggest Muslim country. So they appointed two presidents in a row which had the support of Muslim clerics. And Megawati was vice president. But ultimately she became president for 3 years. Now after those 3 years, she was challenged by one of her ministers, General Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, who formed the Democratic Party and left her government. And at that time, Megawati tied up with Prabowo as a partner. But they lost the election. The deal was that they fight together now and next election, Megawati will support Prabowo for president. Prabowo kept his part of the bargain and told Megawati that I don't think your party is strong enough, so let us bring in a new charismatic leader to become the governor of Jakarta. So they picked Jokowi, who was the governor of Solo, Suryakarta. It is like Agra, historic place, heritage.
Yes.
So they brought Jokowi as their candidate and Prabowo brought a Hawk, a Christian candidate from the island of Belitung to be the vice governor of Jakarta. So the PDIP Gerindra ticket won in 2012 the Jakarta election. And Prabowo expected this coalition to go into the main presidential election. But Megawati decided that no, she is not going with Prabowo. So she backed Jokowi for president in 2014 with Yusuf Kala, who was a Golkar leader. And Prabowo fought against them with other parties. Prabowo lost. In 2019, 5 years later, Jokowi fought again. But this time, the Islamic parties were playing a bigger role. So he brought in an Islamic leader, Maruf Amin, as his vice president. Whereas Jokowi brought in Santiago Uno, who is now a minister but was then governor of Jakarta. And Prabowo lost again. But after the second loss, now Jokowi cannot contest again because the constitution does not allow more than 2 terms for a president. Now Jokowi felt that Megawati and the party don't treat him well even though he is the president. They just treat him as a functionary and he is neither consulted nor given the respect or the honor. So he decided that he must build a larger coalition and not depend on the PDIP. So after his 2019 victory, Jokowi gathered nearly 80% of the MPs in a coalition behind him. 80%. I think other than a Muslim party called PKS, he had almost everybody. Interestingly, he brought Prabowo, who was his rival, into government as defense minister. And therefore, Girindra became a part of the ruling coalition. And this time around, when Megawati wanted to anoint Ganjar Pranovo, she just invited Jokowi to be present, but Jokowi was not consulted. Jokowi felt that his legacy would not last. So he worked out a deal with Prabowo that I will support you for president and you keep my legacy alive.
Done.
Now, Prabowo could not ask for more. He finally gets a shot at being president. He gets a very charismatic president backing him. Please remember, Jokowi, after 10 years today, still has 80% popular support. And Jokowi, just to make sure of things, brought his son as the vice presidential candidate of Prabowo. Even though both Jokowi and his son belong to the PDIP, and his son is presently the mayor of Solo, like Jokowi used to be. So suddenly, after all these years of condemning dynasty, it seems that Jokowi is building his own, not only legacy, but also his dynasty. So Jokowi has a second son who suddenly joined a small party. And that party in this election does not have enough votes to come into parliament. But here I want to explain. When parties contest the parliamentary election, there are only 84 constituencies to elect 580 members. So it is a proportional multi-member election. So the number of votes you gather tells you the number of seats, but some candidates will win because they are candidates with a face, while others will come in as party candidates from a proportional list. So to be in parliament, you must get a minimum of 4% of the national vote. Last time in 2019, there were 9 parties. This time it seems there will only be 8. And this small party that Jokowi's second son has taken over is not getting that 4%, seemingly. But this son is important because when he took over that party, they filed a suit in the Constitutional Court saying, why are people under 40 debarred from becoming president or vice president? Now, this is relevant because Gibran Raka, who's Jokowi's elder son, is only 36 years old.
That is right. Yeah.
So, technically could not be a presidential or vice presidential candidate. So, his younger brother took this case to the Constitutional Court, which is at that time headed by his uncle. Okay? And they decided that yes, we cannot lower the age of 40 as a requirement. But if there is a candidate who is holding an elected post for some years, then he may be allowed, even if he is not 40. So under that, Gibran Raka was allowed to become a candidate and consequently part of the winning team. Subsequently, the rest of the court woke up and said this was a wrong decision, this smacked of nepotism, and the ethics committee took action and removed that uncle from the post of Chief Justice. But he remains on the court. But his decision was not overturned. So all this sounds like a novel, no? But all this is very true.
Yeah. I'm still trying to get. No, I mean, I've read all this, but the way you
Uh,
put it across, it's like Frederick Forsyth's novel. एक इसमें घुस जाओ तो दूसरा कुछ और घुल जाता है.
so now this explains how the election runs. Coalition building. So right now, the parliament will, so the results will come on 20th March. The parliament will only get sworn in on 1st October.
Oh,
And the presidency will change hand on 20th October. So this is the longest lame duck period of a president anywhere in the world. Now, for Jokowi, it is fine because he will use this time to build a stronger coalition behind Prabowo, ensure his legacy and stuff like that. He is not going to be lame duck. He is going to remain an active president. What interestingly, Jokowi's charisma has taken his son and Prabowo to the presidency. But it did not severely dent the PDIP in parliamentary elections. PDIP is still the largest party, but it is only getting 16-17%, followed by Golkar at about 14%, Girendra 13%, and the rest come down to 6, 7, 5%. As I told you, 4% is the threshold. The four parties in Prabowo's coalition do not include the PDIP. But second party, Golkar, third party, Girindra, Democratic Party, and I think PAN. But these parties together only are likely to get 47% of seats in parliament, meaning that they will not have a parliamentary majority. So they need to talk to other parties who supported other candidates to come to their side, become part of government and get a parliamentary majority so that legislation can be more easily passed. Of course, if they talk to PDIP, it's a huge chunk which comes. But I think PDIP this time will probably remain in opposition, at least for now. At least for now. But there are other people who were part of Jokowi's coalition who went over to Anis Basadar who could come back because they have lost. Now, when there are three candidates, there is a requirement that the winning candidate should win 50% plus votes and win a minimum of 20% votes in a majority of Indonesia's provinces. Now, when I was in Indonesia, Indonesia had 34 provinces. Now they have 38 provinces. 4 were created in 2022. So those 4 provinces had their first state legislature elections now. All these are in Papua. So the large Papua was now divided into 5 provinces, 1 original and 4 added. So it seems from the reports that I have read that Prabowo won every state convincingly, except for 2, Aceh and one more, which Anis won, Anis Baswada, the independent. The PDIP won no state. All the PDIP states were won by Prabowo thanks to Jokowi. Now, therefore, PDIP loses the presidency but does not lose its salience in parliament. In the last government, Megawati's daughter, Puan Maharani, that's her name, Puan Maharani, was the Speaker of Parliament. In Jokowi's first term, she was the coordinating minister. Coordinating ministers are normally 4 and they are a rung above ministers. But in Indonesia, ministers are not members of parliament or don't have to be. They are appointed. Now, will PDIP manage to get the speaker's post again and make peace with Jokowi? We don't know. But like Megawati was unhappy with Prabowo, I think Jokowi, who doesn't say so, is unhappy with Megawati for treating him badly and has shown her her place. So, in the battle of dynasties in Indonesia, it is evident that the Jokowi dynasty is coming up. It is evident that the Megawati Sukarnoputri dynasty is fallen on dismal days. Because I think her son and daughter may actually come to parliament because of proportional seats. But whether they will get a position, become parliament head or not, unclear. There was another dynasty of General SBY, president before Jokowi, but his son has not been able to do well. But his son leads the Democratic Party, which is a part of Prabowo's coalition. So it's possible that the son, who's also a former army officer, could become a minister. So what you are likely to see is a elite transition from the Megawati-led elite to a Jokowi and Prabowo-led elite. You will also see a sea change in the ministers because I think PDIP affiliated ministers will be out and more other party ministers will come, particularly Girindra ministers. It is the time of transition in personalities who will come into government. But is it going to be a transition in policy? And that's what now we need to look at. Jokowi went with Prabowo because he wanted his legacy protected. One of the elements of legacy is let's not be beholden to Megawati. So that they have achieved. But there are three other salient points of the legacy that he wants. One, Jokowi invested a lot of his time and energy on infrastructure development in Indonesia, in which China played a big role. The BRI, part of the BRI was announced in Indonesia, and I think Indonesia is one of the biggest benefactors of the BRI. The Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway, the Chitara $100 million floating solar plant, the nickel and copper factories, many special economic zones and ports, all funded by China, major investor. Li Qiang, the Chinese premier, when he visited Indonesia for the ASEAN and EAS meeting in September last year, announced $21 billion of new investments in Indonesia. But that is the level at which China is operating there, to the detriment of all other partners. The second legacy is in mineral processing. So, Indonesia is very heavily invested in minerals, nickel, copper, gold. But Jokowi said, you must do more processing here and bring me as a part of value chains. So China has been reluctant, but Jokowi has been pushing this, particularly on nickel as part of the electric vehicle supply chain.
EVs, yes.
And also copper and huge gold mines forever in Papua. So they are looking for more processing, more employment generation. But China is a biggest investor in nickel. But they are also the biggest violators of human rights, of workers' rights, of their health concerns. So it is up to Prabowo now to deal with this and say, okay, you are here, but please follow my rules and regulations and follow sustainable practices besides expanding the local processing. Third is Jokowi had this idea of building a new capital called Nusantara in Kalimantan. Kalimantan is the island of Borneo. When you showed the map, this was right in the
Well,
center.
I'll just show it again.
So Nusantara is a brand new
Yeah,
city. You see Kalimantan in the center?
yeah,
So that is where Nusantara will come up. The current capital is on Java, which is the southern
Jakarta.
island, but heavily populated. Heavily populated. Whereas Kalimantan is sparsely populated. So Nusantara has no seat in parliament this time. It is not yet a city. So Jokowi wants to develop that, and he has announced plans, and he has got promises from UAE, Saudi, China, Korea, Japan, everybody, but nothing is really happening. The idea is to save Jakarta, which is sinking and perhaps depopulated, but that is unlikely to happen. You may get the government to move. So this is like Naypyidaw in Myanmar, which is far from Yangon, but everybody still lives in Yangon. People say a better idea would have been the Malaysian idea, where you build a city called Putrajaya, which is about half an hour from Kuala Lumpur. So you take the government away, but you build cities in between. Anyway, so Prabowo, who initially was not enthusiastic about this and was non-committal, is now very committed to this as part of Jokowi's legacy. So these three legacy factors Jokowi will continue. Please remember, Jokowi is only 62 years old. So I don't see him fading away. He may become ahead of the Nusantara implementation authority or something. So let's see. Now, there is one more legacy which people don't talk about, and that is that in order to get Chinese investment and economic partnership, Indonesia kept rather silent on Chinese intrusions into their exclusive economic zone, particularly around the
Natuna Sea.
Natuna. Yes. Indonesia always believed that it was not part of China's nine-dash line aggrandizement. But even though Natuna Island is not part of the nine-dash line, the seas are. So China has, in Jokowi's time, merrily walked in there and done IUU, no? Illegal fishing, backed by Coast Guard. Now, Jokowi's maritime and fisheries ministers used to arrest many fishing trawlers from different countries. They were mainly ASEAN countries, Vietnam and others, and sometimes they had to sink them with great fanfare to make the point. They also caught Chinese vessels but never sank any. So this diffidence remained. And even on the Natuna Sea, Prabowo in 2019, when he campaigned against Jokowi, said that Jokowi was a chamcha of China. And if he became president, he would stand up to China, open doors to others. But Prabowo, as defense minister, has been much more muted on China. And in this campaign, he was not critical of China. He said we need to work with everybody. What he said was that on these issues of South China Sea, I will consult with other ASEAN countries who are impacted. But there is no unity among those countries. Philippines is terribly impacted. They are tying up with Japan and USA as trying to stand up to China. The Vietnamese make a deal. Sometimes they stand up, sometimes they take economic handout. Malaysia and Brunei don't say anything. They just turn the blind eye. What will Indonesia do? It's the biggest country, biggest economy of ASEAN. Will it
Yeah.
have strategic autonomy or will it just acquiesce in Chinese intrusions? I think it is too much to expect that Prabowo will move Indonesia away from China economically, so long as the Jokowi influence remains. But Prabowo, as defense minister, had augmented the defense forces of Indonesia, particularly Navy and Air Force, and not the army, which was the traditional strong point. And he bought new equipment, nothing from China. And they stopped Russia also. The US, France, Korea, India, Israel, not Israel, sorry, Turkey, Indonesia has no diplomatic relations with Israel. So he tried to form a strategic autonomy on defense matters. I think that will continue. And we should be satisfied if we can get him to open economic doors with a little bit more of level playing field for others. That by itself, I think, would be a good change from Jokowi's period. I think I will stop here. I think I've explained the election and its positive and its possible impacts. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think you made a lot of points. Actually, you opened out our eyes on Indonesia, because the politics of Indonesia actually defines the country and how it will behave. And if I can put it in this thing, Indonesia is a it seems to be a place full of compromises. They'll compromise anything to keep themselves going, and their external relations also will be based on compromises, and they will not. And having received so much investment from China, it is very difficult to imagine them moving away from China. In fact, I don't see whether they have a choice at all on this. But like you said, and which I said earlier, their security, relationship has always been with USA and others. Uh, so this dichotomy will exist. Where does India stand in this, and where does India-Indonesia relations go ahead in this entire construct? And after all, given the fact that we are also looking at expanding our footprint into the Western Pacific and the ASEAN region, and how do you see our relations uh, changing with Prabowo in? Uh, that is something which is interesting.
Thank you. So, when Prabowo fought the election the first time, and I knew him well, he often told me that he is an Indophile and he would like to do much more with India in defense, in pharmaceuticals, in education, and in trade. So, this is his opportunity now. Even if he doesn't have to loudly say he's an Indophile, he does not have to curtail what he's doing with China, with education, on technology, on student exchanges, on pharmaceuticals, vaccine partnerships. There's enough to do with India. And I think they will do it. On defense, he's the one who came here in 2019 during the pandemic to try and get BrahMos from India. He ran into some issues with parliament. So I think now as president, he will need to sort that out, get the budget properly allocated and go back to getting the BrahMos. You have heard of this so-called spy ship which comes to Sri Lanka and Maldives. So that spy ship, whenever it comes, actually goes through Indonesian waters, mostly the Sunda Strait. So this time when that ship was coming, it turned its transponders off, which as a civilian ship it should not have done. So the Indonesians actually acted against it after a long gap and said, you stop and you put your transponders on. So they forced that ship to stop, put the transponders on, and only then proceed, escorted by Indonesian Coast Guard. To me, that was a courageous act. Now, I did not expect Indonesia to do that. Indonesia, within ASEAN, is India's largest trading partner, with $38 billion. Our bilateral trade is more than our trade with Germany or Japan. But it is largely in Indonesia's favor because we import coal and palm oil. It's a very lopsided trade. So they need to open up more to Indian export, which they are very reluctant. So that is where they need to show more openness. Secondly, Indian companies who want contracts to implement projects in Indonesia are often hampered because the specs are often pro-Chinese. So we have always been asking for a level playing field. The same with pharmaceuticals. We want open access rather than with constrictions. So these all could change. Biggest area
Right.
we could develop is actually education. Those we should. So you see, India is opening an IIT in Malaysia. Though Indonesia, far bigger country, but they don't have that inclination so far. Otherwise, we could have opened it there. So I think this is where we need to look at defense relationship strong, economic relationship good, but could do much more. And socio-cultural relationship is great. India has a large, huge tourist market for Indonesia. Now we have direct flights running to Jakarta and to Bali. So I think things are looking up, and Indians don't need a visa to go to Indonesia. So several things like that are there. But I would say more defense purchases, more open trade and investment will open the way for a much more robust partnership, because I think we can put China aside. I think we can actually cooperate on the Indo-Pacific rather than see it as a hurdle. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. So I think you made a very, very, very valid point that, and this has been something which I have been thinking of. Here is a country which has tremendous, that's also my opening remark. Here is a country which has a fantastic trade relationship with China, right? Whichever way you look at it, and a security relationship with USA, and something which we, like you rightly said, I also read about this BrahMos deal, which was to go through, but 6 7 months back they came and all that. Nothing happened. Maybe last year sometime I remember reading it. So the opening is there, and I think it's time. Now I'll look at it internally. Uh, our diplomacy, our diplomatic footprint has to increase. And it is just not, when I say diplomatic footprint, it is just not the MEA related footprint. I think the MOD related footprint also has to increase. And this is just not here. And if I look at it in our entire neighborhood, our military footprint, or the military diplomatic footprint is weak. And we need to increase it. And I also feel that unless you have many of these countries dependent on you for their defense, whether it is for training or for equipment or maintenance or building their defense infrastructure and thinking, right? We will not be the regional power we wish to be. And I see that, I mean, while our government is trying to do something, but are we doing enough? Is the question, and I would like your view on this.
I agree with you. We have a defense advisor in Jakarta who's a naval officer. Earlier it was rotational. Now it's always a naval officer. Fine. But he is not accredited to ASEAN. So all these Indonesian military diplomacy is often through the ADMM plus, the ARF. But he can't go to those meetings or he's not accredited. So we don't have a defense diplomacy, even though we have defense related institutions. That is where the defense as an institution of diplomacy fails. It does not keep up with the institutional changes around us. But at the same time, defense purchase decisions are sovereign decisions of every government. So this is not infectious. If Philippines bought it, Vietnam and Indonesia don't follow the same thing. But yes, they will take their own decisions. So our defense advisors in Vietnam and Indonesia need to understand the processes. And these processes are not only in the Ministry of Defense. After all, what I'm telling you, the constraint in Parliament, I don't think our defense advisor or MOD understands how to deal with that. It requires for party to party, committee to committee, all kinds of things. I have done it, how to get Indian buffalo meat into Indonesia, how to get Indian rice into Indonesia. In my time, we did. We know how to lobby these. But it has to be backed by industry and by your relevant ministry. For buffalo meat, I had the backing of exporters and EPIDA. For rice, I had the Rice Exporters Association and Agriculture Ministry. But I don't think our side ever understood that BrahMos will get stuck in the Indonesian Parliamentary Committee. So that grasp is not there, no? So I think you need
Yeah.
more coherent planning as a whole of government approach. What are we trying to do? What can we achieve with it? I
I
remember in
think
my time in Indonesia, we had said instead of coming only to Jakarta and Medan, please make sure our ships go to all remote ports. So everywhere they know India. And we used to, when the ship used to go, we used to take food festival, dance, this, that, and make it a nice big festival in every of those places. So our gentle defense visits were integrated into a holistic vision of India as a friend. We used to call it Sahabat India, India's friendship.
Yeah, I think you made very valid points. You're talking of a whole of government approach. You're talking of not only taking defense deals, you're also taking culture. And culture is quite a strong point. So, for those
Yes.
of you who are listening, you must understand Megawati Sukarno Putri. Sukarno Putri is Sukarno's daughter. Pure Sanskrit mein hai ye, right?
And
And Megawati. देखिए, so
Megawati
the
told
point
me,
is,
Megawati told me that Biju Patnaik named her Meghavati. Megha, no, Sanskrit.
uh, okay,
Meghavati. But as they were Indonesia, they slowly changed the name to Megawati. So the H was dropped and the V became a W.
W,
But the Sanskrit name, Megawati.
Megawati. So the
You
point
know,
is, though,
her daughter is Maharani. Her daughter is called
uh,
Pohan Maharani.
Maraniya. So we have this tremendous advantage of culture, which we are also not exploiting. So, like you rightly said, so this is something which I think I'll be more than grateful if we can get. We'll put a panel together, and we'll see how does India increase its diplomatic footprint, and why it should and how it should, as we rise to be a power. It's not enough to have your GDP growing at 7% or 8%. You need
No.
to back it up with a lot of power and influence so that people start listening to you and you have that influence to do. Like, obviously, China has done in Indonesia. In fact, it has formed through trade and everything. So I think we have a lot to learn. This is the great thing which I take away from you today. Uh, the next thing which I want to ask you, so before I take a few questions, is uh, you know, we've all spoken of one nation, one election, and one vote, and that's what our prime minister keeps talking. And we are not. I don't see us getting to that very easily, and it's happening almost by by nature or naturally in Indonesia. Uh, how do you see this transition, if ever it can happen in India, and what are your views on that? Because
So
you've
in
seen this operating
Indonesia,
there.
from 2004, every election was not like this. Incrementally, it has become like this. Something was added, then another thing was added. Then I think in 2019, the parliament was also added. So it is, but as I said, regional governors are still not there.
Yeah, the sixth
So it is
element.
more or less, thing. But they seem to pull it off even without EVMs. But as I told you, 84 people have died due to stress. So it's not an easy process. I think it will be easier if you use EVMs.
Yeah.
But then you know there
Uh,
will be five EVMs, no? One for president,
yeah.
one for this, for that. Yeah.
Well, that's
So
something I think India can solve. It's not as if, I mean, we might not have five elections going together. Even if you have one state election and one central election, I think a large part of our problems will, get this thing. Otherwise, every quarter you are into election mode, and our political parties are forever in election mode. Either they're doing yatras or one way or the other, and it's always so. I think there is a lot to learn from this
well,
entire
so if
story.
anybody wants to see a one nation, one election in action, I think Indonesia is a model. To
Model.
see,
So
you can see how they do it, the pitfalls, the problems. I think everything is visible there.
yeah, I think it's something thing. And honestly, sir, today was a very informative talk which you gave us, eye-opening for us, at least for me, to learn quite a bit. And to be very honest, before I had this talk with you, I myself studied a lot about Indonesia and came. But I think I fell short because whatever I've studied, whatever I've studied, and for the past 1 week, ever since you said Indonesia,
Hmm.
I've fallen short and I've learned a lot. Thanks a lot. My eyes
Most
have
kind.
opened. And
Hmm.
of course,
Thank
I had this great advantage of having studied Indonesia for the past 1 week. All journals, all newspapers where I've been seeing Indonesia, I've been studying, right? And despite that, uh, today I learned a lot, and I wonder the impact you had on all those who have listened and who have not listened. And my request to everyone today who's listened and who'll see this video is please send this to everyone. Because if India wants to grow as a power, the first thing we need to do is know our neighbors. We forget
Yes.
about getting influence out there or not, know our neighbors. And today was a great learning about Indonesia, which the good ambassador has put across to us. I'll take a few questions from the audience. I'll not keep you long. Sitara says, very informative. I also agree with you. And Harjit Bobbar says, very informative. Thank you, Ambassador. Okay, this is a question which I sort of asked. George Willis says, so they elect all government bodies in one go. Can we do that? That's his question. Quick answer, sir, will be
Yeah, I think if they can do it, we can do it. But don't
we
forget,
can do
they are 204 million in 800,000 booths. In our case, it is much bigger. And then the
bigger.
security challenges seem to be much bigger in India than in Indonesia.
Yeah, I think so, sir. And
That is the biggest.
overall, the diversity of Indonesia is not that much as compared to India, and the security challenges in India, where we can't conduct an election on the same day. I mean, there's no way in India we can conduct an election on the same day. Uh, and having conducted elections in Assam, Kashmir, and in Punjab at the peak of troubles, I cannot imagine elections on the same day in our country. I mean, I'm not still talking of those countries where Naxalites still loaf around, unbridled, if I may say so. Uh, right. Reddy says, does Indonesia have any border disputes or conflicts with countries?
So Indonesia is an archipelago. It's all sea everywhere. No? So the one big land dispute they had was with Malaysia in Borneo, Kalimantan that we saw. And I think there was a physical confrontation. It's called confrontasi in Sukarno's time, 1963, when a Gurkha regiment of the British Army on behalf of Malaysia fought an Indonesian post. I think that was the. But they have insurgencies in Papua, which borders Papua New Guinea. With the Timor Leste having become independent and settled, the insurgencies in Timor West and all have now gone. You see, Papua, there's a straight line. On one side is Papua New Guinea, a country, and the left side are now 5 provinces of Papua. And here, where it says NTT, there you have, a part of the island is the country of Timor Leste, which has a
Timor.
checkered history with Indonesia, but now independent country, and Indonesia backing them to become the 11th member of ASEAN. If you see Kalimantan, and on top you see Malaysia, there are 2 provinces of Malaysia, 5 provinces of Indonesia, and then there's Brunei on the Malaysian side. But I don't think there are any active confrontations over here. Active confrontations. There
Yeah.
is the issue of the Sulu Islands with the Philippines. where the piracy and all happens that over that area, or there's piracy in the Malacca state. But I don't think there's any territorial. Of course, the Chinese intrusion into Natuna Sea is their most serious challenge.
Right, sir. Okay. JBJP says, are any consequences for Bharat from Indonesia elections? Are we affected by who wins or not, in the sense that they are pro-Bharat, anti-Bharat parties or politics involving Bharat in elections there?
No, I think they all have a genial feeling towards India. What we need to do is convert that geniality into greater warmth, and the comprehensive strategic partnership must become real. That is our biggest challenge. The second understated challenge is if you see Anis Baswedan's support base and the two provinces he won, these are heavily Islamic. Now, Indonesia is not an Islamic country, it's a Muslim country. But there are rising Islamic forces. And they back Baswedan or they back a third candidate. These are the people who went berserk and even attacked the Indian embassy 3 years ago after the Tablighi problem. So there are elements there who will take advantage of this. We need to work with whichever government is there, because the governments remain genial. The big Muslim organizations, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, remain positive towards India.
Yeah, I think so, sir. Shritik Kotari says, sir, thank you, sir, for discussing this offbeat topic, which I'm sure no one in Bharat is paying attention to, which is a fact. But I think this is not an offbeat topic. We have convinced ourselves mentally that this is an offbeat topic, but it actually is actually a live issue which we should be very clear about. Is paying attention to. I agree with you. No one is paying attention to. People don't realize Indonesia is only 200 nautical miles away, and I look. It is not even 200 nautical miles. If you take off from the southernmost point of the Nicobar Islands, from from Indra Point, you just see Banda Aceh across. It's so close, and it's not at all this thing. It is one of our near neighbors. We don't realize it. We
Now working
recognize.
on connectivity between Aceh and Nicobar, and also trying to develop the port of Sabang in Aceh. So there is some work towards connectivity going on.
Going on. So it is not so far away, and we need to pay more attention,
Yes.
right? And I think this is the biggest takeaway which we have today. And so with this, I leave you. Okay, I'll leave you here, and I must thank you once again uh, for this wonderful discourse on Indonesia, which it's opened my eyes. And I'm going to, tomorrow, this is going to be what I'm going to say, that Indonesia is a country which we have to, reach out to. You can't be a regional power without having your footprint in Indonesia, uh, expanding your footprint in Indonesia. With this, sir, I will thank all the viewers who have attended, with the request again, uh, subscribe to this channel, fine. If you have anyone who sees this, please put your comment. I would like you to put your comment, good, bad, or ugly. Put your comment on how we can uh, you know, increase our relations with Indonesia and expand our relations with Indonesia, right? And if there are more comments, people will at least be tempted to, see this video and gain by it, right? That's what I would request, and also pass it on to all your friends to see this video. I think this is really one of the best videos I've done in terms of gaining information. Right? Thanks a lot, sir. And till the next time, good evening and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jai Hind, General Shankar. Thank you for having me.